now, please keep in mind a few things. We are recording these sessions, and the recordings will be sent to everyone who registered via email, including the slides. If you want to ask a question, you will notice that you are not able to unmute yourself, but we are monitoring the chat window. If you do want to ask a question and open your microphone, you can use the Teams feature of raising your hand, and we will make sure to unmute your microphone. In addition, if you want to learn more about our products or engage with us further, we do have a few options available. You can either join our private community, where you'll be able to take part in private previews or product design sessions and much, much more. Also, you can join our public community, where you'll be able to see many more product webinars, our YouTube channel, blog posts, etc. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always send us to secdays@microsoft.com, and we will make sure to connect you to the relevant person. So with that, Danielle, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Gilly. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Ashwell. I'm a product manager as part of Microsoft Defender for IoT. And here on the call, there are also two of my colleagues, Yair and Meir, and they will assist me and answer on your questions during the presentation via the chat in Teams. So please feel free to ask any questions that comes to your mind. And like Gilly also mentioned, if you'd like to talk and answer and question it, so please feel free to raise your hand and we can have an open conversation. And with that, I think that we can start. So for the agenda for us today, we're going to discuss about the IoT and OT security and zero trust challenges. I'm going to show you the Azure Defender for IoT, what it includes, what are the solutions that's going to be delivered, and what are the main challenges that we are facing. Technical demonstration of our solution, both on-prem and the new features that we published during last November via our cloud, and also a live customer case study, and where you can get more information in order to explore and get more knowledge about our solution. Hello? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we will continue. Firstly, I'd like to talk about how Gartner defines operational technology security, protecting people, asset information involved in the monitoring or control physical devices. And here, when we're talking about the OT security and also the IoT ones, we're talking about how we can control and monitor the critical production infrastructure like pumps, turbines, HMI's machine, engineering working station, and to work on how we can improve the security exposure of these devices and make sure that our environment is safe. So we have a variety of options that can simulate this kind of environment, such as manufacturing, energy and water utilities, smart buildings, pharmaceutical, oil and gas, and much more. When we're talking about the IoT devices and also the OT devices, we're talking about a large variety of devices that we can find in many environments. And the common thing about all these type of devices is that they are unmanaged devices. That means that there is no system that currently monitor these different devices. And each one of these devices is very times a vendor agnostic. And that means that it has a unique behavior that is specific for the vendor and with no dedicated security solution and no dedicated security mindset. So when we start to talk about this variety of devices and where we can find them, firstly, let's start with endpoints. In case you're using Microsoft Defender for endpoints, you'll have the ability to get all the information on the endpoints that have been monitored, like the PCs that you're using, the servers, the mobiles, the laptops, and much more. Among these devices, we can also find IoT devices, such as VoIP phones, camera IPs, and much more endpoints that have been in use in your environment. We can also see the routers, the switches, the access point, and all of this environment can be found on IT networks. And today, they have no security policy that monitor this kind of devices and making sure that these devices are secure. When we're talking about the OT environment, the industrial ones, we can see different variety of devices, we can say. HMI's machine, engineering working station, PLCs, and these devices are basically in charge on the production line that we are monitoring, and they are currently, there's no visibility to them. And since there's no visibility for them, it's very hard to make sure that these devices are secured. Another solution that we also can provide is the security microagent. And the security microagent means that we can install a microagent on a device and monitor all the communication and information that we are seeing among these devices. So after understanding the variety of IoT and OT devices that we can find on different environments, we can see that we have also a few approaches and a few ways we can get the information about them and monitor them. The first one is to get feeds from the Microsoft Defender for endpoints and do all the analysis for the IoT and OT devices. The second one is to use sensors, the IoT enterprise sensor in IT environment to monitor all the IoT devices in IT environment. The third one and the most recommended one is the OT sensor. It's agentless monitoring OT sensor that can monitor all the information, communication, and to visualize the devices, the vulnerabilities and recommendations that associate with them, and also the threat detection that can raise from them. And the fourth one is the security microagent. A nice thing about that is that, as you can see, the Defender for IoT can give you a really strong approach, really strong infra that will support all the different devices that we can see when we're entering to IT and also to OT environments. Now, after understanding this kind of devices, what we see is that these devices are not built with a security mindset. Many of these devices have vulnerabilities, and if you've seen during the last month, there are always new vulnerabilities that publishing every day. Only, I think, a few months ago, our research team announced the bad alloc vulnerabilities report that include over 20 vulnerabilities, and of course, that some of them are critical. That means that if someone can access to one of these devices, it can basically damage your environment. We can see that there are many connections that are unsecured. RDP protocols that have been in use, SSH protocols to devices that are really important and for your organization and shouldn't be this kind of access to them. So what we understand is that a secure device today may be a risk tomorrow. If a device is secure today, it doesn't mean that it always will be secured, since vulnerabilities are publishing every day and this device can be exposed to new vulnerabilities out there. So after understanding what are the IoT and OT devices are, the next question will be, what is the business risk that we are facing with? What are the IoT and OT risks that we can see in our environment? So the first one is the financial one. If someone will get access to the environment, it can cause a shutdown to factories. And here, one of the most known examples are WannaCry, NotPetya, LocalGaga. If someone succeeded to enter to my environment, it can basically spread a ransomware and cause to shutting down factories worldwide and cause to $1 billion in losses. Another example for this kind of risk is North Hydro. If you heard about that, so someone succeeded to hack to North Hydro and he shut down 170 plants for weeks, and it caused to a loss of over $70 million, according to the company. The second IoT risk is the IP theft. And here, if someone can enter to my environment, he can steal all the IP of my company and use this information and knowledge for his own use. And this is why we also would like to make sure that our environment is pretty safe. And the third one, and I think the most important one, is safety. And another example for here that if you heard about it during the last year, was Oldsmar, a water treatment plant. So someone succeeded to hack to Oldsmar plant, and over there he tried to change the hydroxychloroquine levels to a level that if this water would came to a large amount of people, they can basically die if they would touch this kind of water, because they were dangerous and not approved for drinking. So after understanding the three main risks that we are facing with the financial, the IP theft, and safety, I'd like to focus on the Triton attack and to talk a bit more about what does it mean and how it happened. So attacker targeted Tricon's industrial safety technology by Schneider Electric, and they succeeded to use this kind of protocol, the Triton protocol, and to enter to a PLC, to damage it, and to cause to a process to shut down. But the important thing about this use case is that there were many red flags along the way. And if someone would monitor this kind of environment and see all the red flags, they can basically prevent this kind of alert. And I'd like to talk a bit more about the Triton and how this kind of threat happened. So if we're looking on the left side of the slide, we can see the IT environment. You can see the L4, the L3, historian, the app server, DMZ, the corporate information. And from the right, we can see the OT environment, the SCADA with the HMIs, engineering working station, the historian, the PLCs, the RTUs that are basically in charge on the production line of the plant. So let's talk about the kill chain and how we can actually recognize it. So the first thing we see is that the attackers steal the OT credentials from a workstation in the IT environment. After doing so, he succeeded to bridge and to enter from the IT environment to the OT environment to remote access to the engineering working station. Once he succeeded to get to the engineering working station, he reprogrammed a safety PLC using the Tri-Station protocol. And here, he programmed a malware that named Triton and used it to enter to this PLC and to take control of it. After reprogramming this PLC, he disabled the PLC from working and damaged the production line itself. So as you can see, we can find the kill chain in a very clear way when we're seeing all the information and how the access went from the that the attacker entered to the environment and until he got to the PLC itself. And the nice thing about it is that if you would use Defender for IoT, you would detect this kind of kill chain by viewing the different threat detection alerts that showing you the different levels and how this kill chain happened. So what we can find from this this example is that there are many differences between the IT and OT security concept. We can see that the OT security should be more available and safety. They are very vendor agnostic and using protocols that are proprietary for specific vendors. And they are traditionally air-gapped, and there is little and even no visibility to OT risks and to IT devices comparing to the IT environment. So what we can do in order to mitigate and to secure our OT environment. So the Zero Trust recommendation for IoT and OT environment based on what we've seen. So firstly, would like to verify explicitly. Since someone has credentials doesn't mean they need to be there. We need to make sure that there's authentication and authorization to implement least privilege access and to assume compromise. We'd like also to apply basic hygiene to patch where possible. If there are devices that are important and critical to my production line, what I would like to do is to understand what are the most important devices to see what are the vulnerabilities that I have about them, if someone is exposed to RDP connection, if there is any SSH2 devices that should be isolated, and to patch the vulnerabilities that I see among them if they are critical, and also to implement multi-factor authentication to make sure that the employee that access to this kind of device has the privilege to do so. The third thing is to implement continuous monitoring to see what are the devices that I have in environment. I can't protect on devices that I don't know. And this is why it's really important to understand what are the devices that exist in my environment, what are the communication that associate with them, to see which one among them are more risks, and of course to monitor all of them and to build a really strong approach on how can I mitigate and to close the gap in securing these devices. The first one is talking about the unified IT and OT security monitoring governance in your SOC. And this use case, I think it's even the most important one. We know that currently the companies, you have already a process that you are using every day in order to mitigate all the IT risks and threat detections, the threat intelligence engines you're using. So what we would like to do is to integrate with the current the current ecosystem that you are working, so that when you're investigating the OT and the IoT threats, you'll be able to mitigate and solve them in your SIEM and source system if they are Microsoft, and even if they are not. If you're using Sentinel, IBM QRadar, or Splunk, we will know to integrate with all of them to give you all the information that you need in order to close the risk on your OT and IoT devices. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Azure Defender for IoT, what our solution includes, how you can use it, and what are the main challenges that we address for our clients. There are 5 main challenges that we're seeing in OT and IoT environment. The first one, it relates to IoT and OT asset discovery. What are the devices that are being in use in the different plants that I have all over the world? What are the communication that I see? If I have any RDP connection or not, I would like to know about it. I can see the risk and vulnerability management. When getting the information on the devices themselves, I can get to a really deep level of information, and by that to see what are the vulnerabilities that exist on each one of the devices. What are the protocols that are unencrypted and being in use in the environment? And then I can work with my teams and prioritize mitigation steps and how we can improve the security exposure. The third one is the continuous IT and OT threat monitoring, the incident response and threat intelligence. Once getting all the information on the devices and communication, I can create a baseline that includes all the information that I collected from this environment, and then I can alert on anomalies that I see in the network. Even more than that, in operational wise, if someone commanding a PLC to stop working or commanding on any device to do something which is not allowed, I will be able to record this kind of risks and notify to my SOC team so that they will be able to investigate and see what were the root cause that this action happened. And the fifth challenge, and the most important from all, how can I unify the IT and OT security monitoring and governance to collect all the threat detections that I see out there and to make sure to integrate with the current ecosystem that our companies are using? So after understanding the challenges we're facing, we actually describe the principles that we would like to implement in our solution. The first one is discover, reveal the unknown, reveal all the devices and communication that exist in my environment. Then assess the risk, assess what we've seen, what were the main risks that we will need to mitigate on these kind of devices and mitigations. The third one is detect. Do I have any ransomware out there in the network? Is there any machine with WannaCry ransomware, for example? And the fourth is mitigate. How can I mitigate the risk that I've seen with my SOC team and to make sure that my environment will be more safe? So our solution is passive monitoring. That means that there is no connections, no live connection to the environment, and by that we are not damaging the network communication in your environment. We're just passively monitoring all the communication that we're seeing, and from this passive monitoring, we will be able to visualize the devices, the communication, and also the threat detection that relates to it. And since this is a passive monitoring tool, it's really fast to deploy it, and you can get time for value only from deploying each one of the sites in a very effective way. The second one is understand what do I have in my network, what are the devices that are being in use, how my network infra builds, how the devices communicating, on which protocols, what each of them includes, what are the vulnerabilities that I can see, how can I investigate, and also to build playbook to mitigate this kind of risks. And the third one, how can I native integrate with the SOC tools for unified IT and OT monitoring and governance? So with that being said, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. 1 second, I see that we'll plug in again. Sorry for that. So here, as you can see, once getting the information on the environment themselves, also from the ICS and OT network and from the enterprise IoT networks, I can transfer all the information to Defender for IoT, to Azure, to investigate this information via logic apps, via Sentinel, via Cus2, and to understand what are the risks that I'm facing with. All of this is also covered by Section 52 threat expertise, foreign nation state defender for IoT and OT security researchers, and they're working constantly to understand what are the new vulnerabilities that we can see out there, to investigate new malwares that we've seen, and also to get all this information into Azure ecosystem. And only from connecting to the cloud, you'll be able to get the threat intelligence with all the new information in an automatic way without doing anything. And of course, that this information is part of the threat intelligence that Microsoft is running and integrate with the Microsoft Global Threat Intelligence for derived from 8+ million signals collected daily. So this gives us a unique insight informated by trillions of signals from all the different threat intelligence teams all over the world that are part of Microsoft ecosystem. And with that, I'd like to talk a bit more about the Azure Sentinel and the integration we have with Azure. So for what I understand from Gail, you had a session with Sentinel before that. And Defender for IoT has a native integration with Sentinel, and that means that all the threat detection, all the alerts that we are seeing from our system, from Defender for IoT, can be sent directly to Sentinel to investigate all the information from there using the SOC tools that are currently available. With all the machine learning combined with contextually updated threat intelligence, and also to reduce the complexity and the TCO. That means that all the infra that is currently available from Sentinel is also efficient for Defender for IoT as well. And it will give you the ability, if we're talking about the OT and IoT specifically, to get a deep understanding on the IoT and OT contextual information, to understand what are the threat intelligence that are being released from Section 52, and also to build SOAR playbooks which will be specific for OT challenges. So when we're talking about the Sentinel platform, so here you can see example of incident that we've seen in the network with PLC programming. We can see the entities that relates to this incident and also the ability to get more information about that. Now, even more than that, there are already workbooks which are plugged in, and you can create any workbook that you like in order to create analytics and to understand what is the information that you are seeing. And the nice thing about it is that you can see the different level of incidents, what are the severities, which devices were involved in this kind of incidents, the vendors that are being used, trends, and to build any playbook based on the information that we're sending to Sentinel. And even more than that, let's talk about how we can basically approach the different threats that we're seeing. So the first one is the automatic forensics. So for example, if we have the Triton, we can block the workstation from communicating with the different devices, and to identify when we have RDP or any port scans that happens out there in the network. We can create an automated investigation if someone command on PLC programming or to stop working or to do any scan. So we can see the specific channel, the incidents that relate to each other, and based on this information to build a much more accurate playbook that will assist us to investigate and solve these kind of incidents from happening. And another really important note is that we can integrate with all the different security solutions that exist out there. The fact that we are Microsoft and working with the Microsoft ecosystem and Microsoft tool, we are also agnostic and can work with the variety of security tools that are currently available, like IBM QRadar, Skybox, Palo Alto, Aruba, or any other security tool. So IoT Defender, we have enterprise customers. The solution that we are delivering is validated on a different environment with different verticals in oil and gas, manufactured, pharmaceutical, and much more. And this is also give you the statement that our solution is validated and working in a very stable position. So let's talk a bit more about the deployment and how we can use Defender for IoT in your system, how we can access it, and what we will get from it. So we can enter our sensor and to connect it to the network switch that you have in your environment. After doing that, using the deep packet inspection, the DPI pattern, so we can analyze all the protocols that we are seeing, even the protocols on the layer 2, such as NetBIOS, S7, S7+, SIP, Ethernet, and much more. And this gives us the information about the devices that are currently being in use in the network. Because as you know, in this environment, some of the devices don't have IP at all. They're working only with MAC addresses in sometimes. And they also have a really, let's say, old equipment. And using this pattern, we can get all the information on these old devices and to visualize the environment to our customer so that they will know what are the devices that exist, what is the information that is being monitored, and what are the communications that are being in use. So once getting all this information and visualize all the information via our tool, we can send the devices information, the vulnerabilities, and the threats to Azure Defender for IoT. And here we have a solution which is on premises, on a physical machine or on a virtual machine in the environment itself, or that you can use the cloud connected solution. And that means to allow access to Azure, and you can monitor and see all the information over there. In our demonstration, I also already prepared a Azure environment, and I will show you how it's going to look like. And then we can also send all the information, whether if you're going to use the cloud solution or the on-prem solution, to Azure Sentinel, and to investigate all the incidents that we're seeing from there. So once we're entering the network sensor to the environment, we're using machine learning to understand all the information and to analyze the protocols, to understand what is the software information, the networks, the hardware, the behavioral attributes. And by investigating these protocols, we can create profiles for the devices to visualize all the information that we're seeing on a given device, to see the network map and the different communication between these devices, and of course, to create a database that includes all the information on your OT and IoT devices, and to analyze it and to understand what are the risks, what is the threat detections, and how we can mitigate them. So with that, I'd like to move to the product demo to visualize our solution and to talk a bit more about what we can gain from Defender for IoT. I'd like to give also another heads up. Currently, we are working on a new sensor version that is going to be published by the end of January. And with that, I will move to the solution itself. Okay. In this device, we can see the number of alerts that we've seen in the environment. It gives us a really clear understanding about how many critical alerts I have in my environment, what are the suspicious malware that I've seen, what are the unacknowledged alerts, and to start analyze to understand why this action happened in my network. After understanding the security exposure and what are the threats that I have in my environment, I can move pretty quickly to the device inventory. And in the device inventory, I will get understanding about all the devices that are currently being in use in my environment. I'm sorry, I'll just make sure that the VPN connection is working. So just 1 second, I'm just checking my VPN connection.
It's never a good demonstration if it works on the first try.
It couldn't be more right. I'm very sorry about it. I'll get back in a sec. Okay. Now the VPN connection is good and we can continue. So after understanding the threats and all the alerts that I see among my environment, I can move to device inventory to understand what are the devices that I have actually seen in the network, what are the protocols that have been in use, the first time that I've seen this kind of device and when it last communicated, what is the name of the device, the IP address that's associated with it, and of course, much more information that I can gain on this device. You can see also the model number, the firmware version. All this information is going to assist me to understand what is the accurate vulnerabilities that associate with these devices. So after seeing all the information to explore, I can even export it to CSV and to investigate it with my team to make sure they are aware on all the devices that exist and they can verify them in my environment. I can move into device map and to understand pretty quickly what are the connections that I see in my environment. So as you can see, the Purdue level right here, you can see in a very clear way the separation between the devices by Purdue layer. And I'd like to focus on the process control Purdue layer. So here, I can even see all the information and the different devices. I can scroll down and to see the information that I have among them. And here, I can also see the devices that I have alerts. So I would like to click on this device. And here I can get a really heads up about what is this device. You can see the type of this device is PLC, the protocol that have been in use with the Ethernet IP SIP, the IP address of this device, and I'd like to get even more information about this. I know this device exists. I can see that it has 4 alerts, and I can see that it's an important device because I tagged it as an important device. So I'd like to see the properties of this device. Now, once opening this information, I can see the exact rec slots that exist on this device, to open them up and to see the specific information that exists on each one of these slots. And this can give me a lot of information about the device and what it includes. Now, even more than that, since I know that there are 4 alerts on this device, what I would like to do is to understand what happened. So I would like to see the events that correlate with this device. I can see the different events that happened on this device, like the PLC configuration read, program upload, and much more information right here. I can see the alerts on this device and what happened, and even to download the pickup file from the time that this threat happened in my network, to investigate it, to see what are the communication that happened before that and afterwards, in order to understand a bit more about what happened and to mitigate the risks. So this gives me a lot of understanding regarding not only what is the device in my network, but what are the specific events that happened, what are the alerts that I've seen on it, and how this device communicates and the information that it includes. Now, if we will get back to the device map, so another really nice thing is that I have all the OT protocols from the left pane, and I can visualize the different protocols that have been in use, and to see what are the devices that communicate on these protocols. So for example, if I choose Ethernet IP, I can see the devices that communicated on Ethernet IP on blue. I can see the subnets that have been in use. I can mark or filter the different information. So let's say, for example, I'd like to see all the devices in my environment that communicating on SMB over IP. So I can see them pretty quickly and to start investigate, to get more information about them. So I'll have more information I can tackle and start improve the risk of my environment. Now, even more than that, I can simulate attack vector. I can see what are the RDP or what are the external connections that I have to my environment, and to see what are the exposed that my environment is currently exposed to, how the external attacker can take use of the, let's say, unencrypted or internet connection to this device, and by that leverage it to enter to important device that I have in the process control, and to control and to damage my environment. So after exploring these different possibilities to view the information and how we can mitigate it, another nice thing we can do is that we can go to risk reports, to risk assessment, to download the report and to understand what we can do to mitigate this kind of risk, because we've seen many out there in the network. So I already downloaded it for us, just to save time. So you can see that the exposure, the security score of my environment is pretty low. That means that the environment that I'm managing is not in a really good state when talking about security. We can see very quickly the incident that we're seeing from this environment. What are the number of unauthorized devices, the internet connections that we detected, the ICS network detection, the firewall rules, and much more information that will give to my SOC team tools in order to investigate and understand what they can do in order to mitigate these kind of risks. Now, I would like also to show you an example of a specific device. So we can see that we have here a device with this IP, and it's running a Windows Server 2016. We can see the ports that have been in use. So you can see that there's a use of remote desktop, team viewer. We can understand pretty quickly that we would like to see why this device has these ports in use, and if they are allowed in my network or not, because that can cause a risk to my environment. Another really nice example for that is that you can see here, let's say, another example of the HMI machine and the CVEs that associate with it. And you can see that there are critical CVEs that found on these HMIs. And of course, in order to mitigate this risk, we would like at least to build a process to make sure that the critical vulnerabilities on these important devices are going to be tackled on the next 3 to 4 months to make sure that this device will be much more secure. And of course, the Azure and how we can get all the information from a single pane of glass to assist to our different teams to start investigate and to understand what are the information that we're seeing. So like I mentioned before that, we can integrate all the different sensors that have been installed on my environment to integrate them with Azure and to get an understanding about all the information that I see on my environment, what are the PLCs that have been in use, the HMIs, and much more things like that. We can see all the information from here. And the nice thing is that it's never mind what kind of solution you're going to use, if it's going to be the sensor OT, the enterprise IoT sensor, the Microsoft Defender for endpoint, or much more. You can get all the information in the same language from Azure Defender for IoT, and it will assist you to investigate more. So let's say, for example, I'd like to investigate this PLC and to see what is the information that I have on it. So I can get information about the general properties that it associates. I can view the full details of this device. When opening the few details of this device, I can get the list of attributes to see what all the information that I've been tracked on this device, to understand what is the backplane of this PLC and what is the information that associates with it, the open vulnerabilities, the alerts, and recommendation. And it will give tools to my SOC team to start analyzing and to understand a bit more about what they can do to fix it. So with that, I will get back to the presentation. And I'd like to show you a customer case study, and it happened with one of our largest customers. He has a BMS system. He has a lot of buildings all over Manhattan that he is managing, and he used our tool in order to investigate and to see what is the security risks that they are facing with in the different buildings that he is managing. So you can see here an example of how he installed the different sensors and how he monitored them and the name that he gave to each one of them. And the nice thing about his use case is that in one of his buildings, you've seen that there's a connection to one of the devices, an RDP connection that is not allowed. And he didn't understand why this elevator has actually a RDP port, which is communicate, because he didn't allow it as part of the policy of the building. So when investigating this kind of threat via Sentinel, he understood that the guy, the deployment engineer that installed the elevator on this building, he just left a few open ports that he can access remotely and to manage this elevator. And by that, he basically left a back door to the environment, because anyone who can get used to the RDP connection to this elevator can access it, and by that to get access on all the environment that he has and potentially damage this environment. So it's a really nice example of about how our customers use both Sentinel and Defender for IoT in order to understand what is the risk and, of course, to mitigate it with both tools. So during this session, I tried to actually to elaborate about how it's easy to deploy our solution and to get all the information about the IoT and OT devices and communication, the support we have on all major industries, protocol and equipment like Siemens, Rockwell, Schneider, GE, and much more. The unique insights informated by trillions of signals that covered from Section 52, and of course, the different Microsoft researchers all over the world. The native integration with Azure Sentinel, which allows us to understand, to give the SOC teams tools to start investigate OT incidents and to mitigate them. And of course, that our solution is proven in large and complex enterprise environment and used daily by different teams across. And it addresses the key gap for CISOs in order to understand what are the risks and to mitigate them. So of course that we will be very happy to display our solution a bit more, to start analyze, to explain about the SIEM and XDR session and how we can integrate with this solution as well. The Defender for IoT announcement and how you can use also the cloud functionality via Azure itself to integrate with the different solution, with Sentinel, with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, to get all the information in a single pane of glass, to get a full product demo with your environment, or of course, we can present with our own environment right here in the lab, to explain a bit more about the different threats and malware like Triton, Configure, WannaCry, and much more. And of course, that we will be very happy to assist and to explain also about the design partner program, the early availability program that we are running, and we're giving to our to some of our customers to explore and to investigate the new features that we are going to release. So thank you very much for this session. And of course, feel free to approach us anytime. We will be very glad to give you more explanation and to show you all the functionalities and the strength of our platform.
Thank you very much, Danielle, for a wonderful session. We do have 7 more minutes. If anyone has any additional questions, I have allowed microphones. So if you do want to ask a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself at this stage and ask a question as well. Or you can also use the chat window.
So yes, I'm going to send the deck that I just showed you to Gili, and Gili will share this slide with all of you. You can get this full presentation and of course, much more information in Microsoft on the solution itself and how you can use it in your own environment.
Yeah, so all the slides and all the recordings will be shared at the end of the event, so at the end of day 2. And you will receive it all at one time via email. So we do have a question in the chat window. And it's, why do I need the IoT Hub to connect to the Defender for IoT to Sentinel?
So basically, it depends on the solution that you'd like to get. If you'd like Sentinel to work with Defender for IoT, so you not necessarily need IoT app to connect to the Sentinel. You can just connect the sensors that you have on your environment to Sentinel directly. You don't need necessarily IoT hub on the way. Thank you. So please feel free to raise any question that you have on your mind. I mean, I'll be very happy to answer on them. Okay, so there's a question, is there differences between the on-prem and the cloud version of Defender for IoT in terms of functionality? So the answer for it is yes. But the elaborate answer for that will be is that 6 months from now they will have the same functionality, and via Azure you'll have even more functionality than the on-prem solution. As part of our roadmap, and of course, if you'd like to hear more, I'll be happy to schedule a roadmap session. But we're going to use our cloud infra as a single pane of glass, and that means all the functionalities that currently available via the sensor are going to be available via the cloud, and it will give you a scale environment, an ability to use all our functionalities in scale. So yes, the answer for it will be that currently we're working on including the Defender for IoT as part of E5. And yes, it's going to be included in E5.
Are there any additional questions? You can also feel free to unmute your microphone and ask them as well. Okay, if there are no additional questions, we will give you back 3 minutes, and then we will have, oh, I see that we have a question. Does IoT sensor sit on a layer 2 devices? Okay, so this is a really good question. And if you remember in the beginning of the session, I showed you 4 different options that you can use. And we have 2 offerings of sensors. There's the OT sensor, which is staying on the layer 2 of your environment. And there's also the IoT sensor, which is sitting on 3.5 or even 4 layer of your environment. So it depends which sensor you're going to use. For the OT environment, we're really recommending on our OT sensors, and this is also what I demonstrated. Okay, if we don't have any additional questions, we will go out to a 17-minute break. And when, oh, here's another question. How do you ensure you have complete network coverage? So again, it's also a really good question. And the answer for it will be that I'm aware that there are different challenges when that I'm trying to mitigate. And this is why I'm offering a variety of solutions. So the first solution is the agentless sensors, the OT sensors that I just actually presented. But there are 3 more solutions. The second one is the IoT sensor, which is monitoring above the DMZ layer. The third one is the micro agent, and here you have the ability to install agent on devices and use them in order to get more feeds and more knowledge to your environment. And the fourth one is the integration with Microsoft Defender for endpoints. And here we can actually get all the information that Microsoft Defender for endpoints is including, and to analyze it for OT and IoT analysis. So there are 4 different solutions. And I can say that the first one and second ones are for what I'm seeing for the enterprise customers, are most in use, because a lot of customers that already have Microsoft Defender for endpoints also taking the Defender for IoT, and they're using also the sensors in order to get the full coverage. So once they get those different feeds, they can get a lot of information into their system. Okay, so now we are at time. And we will take a 15-minute break. We will be back in 15 minutes for a session on Risk IQ Illuminate. Risk IQ is one of the newest acquisitions for Microsoft, and we will hear more about that in our next session. I will post the connection link to that session in the chat window. So thank you again, Danielle, very much for the session, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.